Part 1, The Fabric. Chapter 1, A Republic, if you can keep it. We don't live in a democracy, or at least we aren't supposed to be living in a democracy. Maybe we are living in a democracy now. If everyone believes we do and thus acts as though we do, perhaps we do live in a democracy. And if we have exchanged our republic for a democracy, we have willingly handed ourselves over to tyranny. And as we are constantly encouraged to do everything to strengthen democracy, we are being called to strengthen this tyranny over ourselves. And we voluntarily do so. It is quite a paradox. Now, just quick commentary, I'm not going to get into it. I went into a lot of democracy in the episode 1, but this idea of voluntarily inviting tyranny over ourselves is a part of the unraveling of the fabric, and you have to get through the entire chapter and the entire next chapter and the entire next chapter to really understand this. I hope you will stick with this audio version and not give up before you get to the really good stuff. This is really just a primer on what you thought you knew, and hopefully you will have a new perspective after finishing chapter 1. So back to it. What is a democracy anyway? We often use the word where another is more accurate. Do we want to spread democracy, or do we want to spread liberty? Do we want to protect democracy, or do we want to protect our freedom? Are we afraid of threats to democracy or threats to our way of life? Democracy is not the same thing as freedom, yet too often people equate democracy with freedom. They resonate in the mind as one and the same. They are not. Democracy is a type of governance that is simplistically stated as majority rule, popularized in our psyche by ancient Greece. In ancient democracy, individual citizens practiced direct sovereignty by participating in all the decision-making facets of the polis. Decisions ranging from war and alliances with other governments to pronouncing judgments on their fellow citizens. While this direct democracy seems to offer a lot of power to the individual citizen, the reality is instead the complete subjection of the individual to the authority of the community. Not to mention that the power rested only in the hands of ruling class men. I do have some commentary here. This complete subjection of the individual to the authority of the community will become much more clear as we delve deeper into what democracy really is. So let's get back to it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a philosopher of the so-called Enlightenment, whose writings informed the founders regarding the dangers of democracy. And if one reads Rousseau's works today, what we see happening in the United States as part of the unraveling seems to align with his premises and explanations of and for democracy. It is through Rousseau's writings we can understand the goals and motivations of those who embrace the notion that we live in a democracy and should live in a democracy. Rousseau's basic premise is that man is inherently good, but society has made man evil. Savage man is the one who lives according to impulse, with no thought or contemplation, just addressing what he needs to do to survive any given day. So because man is inherently good, his natural impulses are naturally good. Therefore, morality is the result of following one's impulses. If it feels right, do it. According to Rousseau, there is no moral right or wrong, no ethical conscience, no higher or transcendent self. Rousseau does not believe in a transcendent self at all. He affirms the essential unity and goodness of human nature by declaring that there is no difference between what one feels like doing in the moment and what one should do. They are one and the same thing. To Rousseau, morality is synonymous to uninhibited impulse. What someone thinks is a conscience, according to Rousseau, is just society dictating to them what is right or wrong. Instead of a tension between transcendent ethical purpose and contrary inclinations, Rousseau assumes a tension between man and the institutions of conventional society. In other words, society is the problem, not man. Quote, "O virtue, sublime science of simple souls, are there so many difficulties and so much preparation necessary in order to know you? Are your principles not engraved in all hearts? And is it not enough in order to learn your laws, to commune with oneself, in the silence of passions, to listen to the voice of one's conscience?" End quote. To some, this might sound like natural law. To some Christians out there, this might even sound like the law of God written on man's heart. Do not be tricked. Remember that there is no conscience, just uninhibited impulse. According to Rousseau, we need to separate ourselves from the arguments of society. What society tells us is right and good. That is the only way we know what we should do. It really is the idea that if it feels good and right to you, then it is good and right for you. So don't doubt, just do it. Okay, some commentary. I actually think this is one of the reasons people who embrace the idea of democracy so fervently can also have no problem with atheism and or moral relativism and like to blame religion for all the problems, as religion is just a product of society setting up the rules that people in that society use to inform a non-existent quote-unquote conscience. I think these people understand, at least subconsciously, that with democracy, society is the problem, and that makes it very easy to also say religion is the problem. And I won't digress too far with that, but for the listener, I do suggest going and reading Galatians 5, and we could talk about that passage all day too. Anyway, back to it. Actually, I think I'll back up a little bit. According to Rousseau, we need to separate ourselves from the arguments of society. What society tells us is right and good. That is the only way we know what we should do. It really is the idea that if it feels good and right to you, then it is good and right for you. So don't doubt, just do it. This is the opposite of Winthrop's argument. John Winthrop, in his little speech on liberty, said, quote, "The first type of liberty is common to man with beasts and other creatures. The exercise and maintaining of this liberty makes men grow more evil, and in time to be worse than brute beasts. Omnis sumus licentia deteriorus. This is that great enemy of truth and peace, that wild beast." End quote. Here, Winthrop is saying that the freedom Rousseau is arguing as true freedom, the morality Rousseau is heralding as uninhibited impulse, is the opposite. To operate in such freedom makes men grow more evil, not good. And such liberty is the enemy of truth and peace. Quote, "The other kind of liberty this is John Winthrop, the other kind of liberty I call civil. It may also be termed moral, in reference to the covenant between God and man in the moral law, and the politic covenants and constitutions amongst men themselves. This liberty is the proper end and object of authority." End quote. But Rousseau argues that the liberty of the beasts is better, as savage man does not worry about what is right or wrong and has no imagination toward violence. Whereas Rousseau argues that society has made man evil, and thus civil man is evil, not savage man, Winthrop argues civilization is the solution, not the problem. To Winthrop's point, it does appear that boundaries and rules can, in some instances, provide for more freedom. For example, at a playground near a very busy road, think the interstate with cars constantly zipping by, no brakes in traffic at all. Children will tend to stay close to the equipment even if there are a few acres surrounding the playground. However, put up a fence and the children appear to have more freedom. They will play all the way up to the fence, even if it is only a few yards from the busy street. The fence gives them the freedom to use the extra acres around the playground. They may add games like kickball or tag to their playground romps. Without the defined boundaries, the children do not take advantage of all the freedom available to them. Give them a boundary, and they open their lives up to several more opportunities. Rousseau's argument is again the opposite. It is the boundaries that cause the evil and restrict freedom. For example, there would be no trespassing or looting or destruction if no one owned property. Or at a more global level, there would be no competition between nations or societies, no wars, if there was no civilized society. If the boundary did not exist, one could never cross the boundary, and thus there would be more freedom. Therefore, Rousseau argues, mankind would be better off if we had never been civilized. But Rousseau has a problem. We have been civilized. I think I'll end there for this section.